All right, here we are, back again. Canto 4. Virgil has led the pilgrim through the gates of hell. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. He has brought him through the neutrals, who are whipping around a banner because they never followed anything in their life. He's brought the pilgrim to the Acheron, the main river over which you cross to get into hell proper. And he has explained how all of these souls who have lost the good of the intellect have their fear has turned into desire. They want to be here, right? This is where they want to be because they don't want to be with God. So here we have the first circle, Canto 4. I'm going to begin again. A heavy thunderclap broke the deep sleep that had filled my head, such that I jumped up like a person who was woken by force. With my eyes refreshed, I moved them around, and standing straight up, I stared fixedly in order to know the place where I was. Indeed, I found myself upon the edge of the painful valley of the abyss, embraced all around by infinite woes. It was dark and deep, and shrouded over such that, straining my eyes toward the bottom, I did not distinguish anything there. Now let us descend here to the blind world, the poet said to me, having turned pale. I will go first, and you come thereafter. I noticed his color changing and said, how can I do this if you are afraid, who have always been my comfort in doubt? And he said, the anguish of these people who are here below paints my countenance with pity, which you apprehend as fear. Let us go. The long road urges us on. Thus he went, and thus he made me enter that first circle that runs round the abyss. And here, the only sound that could be heard was not the sound of weeping, but of sighs, which made that eternal air to tremble. These came forth from a pain without torture, pain borne by a crowd, a grand multitude composed of infants and of women and men. My good master, to me, you do not ask what spirits these are that you now behold. I want you to know, before you go far, these did not sin, and even have merit, though not enough, for they were not baptized, which is the door into that faith you hold. We're going to have to take that with a grain of salt. Again, Virgil himself is one of the ones who was rebellious to God's law, which is sin, has lost the good of the intellect because of sin, is one of the no good souls that has passed over here, whose fear has turned itself into desire. And so when he says, these did not sin, we have to recognize from what perspective he's saying that. He's not, Dante himself, the poet, is not saying that those here in this circle never sinned. He is identifying this Aristotelian gradation of vices and using Christian language to do this. And so it seems maybe a little confusing, but he's going to be giving a commentary on how sin affects the soul. And there are, when we get to Canto 11, we'll see this more clearly, there are some sins that are more hateful to God than others because of how it corrupts the human soul. And that's what he's identifying here, that these are way up at the top. It's as if they didn't sin, they just didn't have faith. Well, we know from Romans that all that is not of faith is sin. And Dante knew that too. So this is coming from the mouth, not directly from the poet in his Christian faith and the doctrine that he held to, but rather coming from the mouth of Virgil, who is very consistently still a pagan and still doesn't have a complete understanding of the truth. And if they lived before the Christian faith, they did not honor God as was his due. I am one of these. For this fault alone, pages stuck together. For this fault alone, and not for other sins, we are deprived, and sigh not from pain, but from knowing this, we live in desire, and yet without hope. So these are what are often called the virtuous pagans. And that phrase never comes up in the text. There's no where Dante himself says virtuous pagans. But this is the name that's been given to this realm and these people, simply by the fact of they were more virtuous than the people down below. The people down below are punished for specific sins: lust, gluttony, avarice, wrath, heresy, and so forth. But here they're punished not because of sin, but because of a lack of faith. And that still is enough to get you into hell. Obviously, they're all here in hell. But he's identifying this distinction between different kinds of rebellion. The circles 2 through 9 are going to be full of rebels who actively pursued unrighteousness. Those are all going to be sins of commission. Here in this first circle, we have the sins of omission, the sin of not believing in God, not honoring him as he is worthy of being honored. Great sorrow gripped my heart when I heard this, for I knew that people of greatest worth were suspended in limbo forever. So when it says suspended in limbo, we get that sense of an in-between world. No, they're still here in hell, right? They are still suffering the consequences of their rebellion against God's law. It's just not the kind of consequence that the lustful or the avaricious or the violent are going to suffer. Tell me, my master, tell me, Lord, I said, for I desire to be fully convinced of that one faith that conquers every doubt. Has anyone ever left either by his or another's worth that then was blessed? Has anybody left here and gone up into heaven? He understood my covert speech and said, I was newly come to this condition when I saw a mighty one descending, crowned with the token of his victory. Now, the name of Christ is never mentioned in Inferno out of respect for the person of Christ, but he is referred to everywhere, often. And here's the first direct time that Christ is referred to, the mighty one descending. This is Holy Saturday, right? Christ descended into Hades, as we confess in the the Apostles' Creed. He descended into Hades. He descended, Ephesians 4, into the lower parts of the earth, and then brought with him the whole host of his redeemed. These are the saints from the Old Testament, those who were in Hades, those who were in the place of the dead, not as a punishment, but as a waiting ground, until paradise was created when Christ rose from the grave. He says to the thief on the cross, today you will be with me in paradise. And he brings all of his saints up to paradise, and then is raised from the grave to join them in the flesh. And so this is the event called the harrowing of hell, where all of the Old Testament saints who had believed in the promises of God, had put their hope and faith in him and the promises made to them through the Old Testament scriptures and prophets, they were here waiting for this realm of paradise, to be made in the ascension of the Son that happened at this time. So he says, so Virgil died in 19 BC. So this was about 50 years later, in 33 AD, when Jesus did this. And so he was newly come to this condition. He had only been in hell 50 years compared to the 1300 years now. I was newly come to this condition when I saw a mighty one descending, crowned with the token of his victory. He led forth the shade of our first father, that's Adam, of Abel, his son, and that of Noah, of Moses, the lawgiver, who obeyed, of Father Abraham and King David, of Israel with his father and sons, that's Jacob with Isaac and his 12 sons, and with Rachel, for whom he worked so hard, and of many others, and made them blessed. And I want you to be sure, before these, no human spirits had ever been saved, right? Nobody had been saved apart from Christ, apart from the death of Christ that canceled their guilt, that cleansed them from their sins. So Virgil doesn't know why, but he knows that no one had been saved before Christ came and gathered his elect. We did not stop moving because he spoke, but were, however, walking through a wood, I mean, of densely packed spirits. We were not far from where I fell asleep, when I saw a bright flame in the distance that quenched the darkness of that hemisphere. Yet we were still a little ways away, but not so far I could not tell that place boasted of an honor-loving people. O you who honor both knowledge and art, tell who these are that have so much honor, it sets them off with the way of others. He said to me, the honor of their name, which is still sounded in your life above, obtains grace in heaven that sets them here. There's something that Virgil thinks as a blessing in being set here, in which he is assuming God is honoring them for their nobility, for their honor, as is repeated over and over in these lines. Meanwhile, I heard another voice which said, give honor to him, the poet most high. His shade now returns that had departed. After the voice was still and quieted, I saw 4 stately shades coming toward us. Their faces were neither happy nor sad. My good master began to speak of them. Look here, at him who comes before the 3, with sword in hand, indeed, as if a king. That one is Homer, the sovereign poet. Behind him comes Horace, the satirist. The 3rd is Ovid, Lucan, last of all. Because they each join together with me in the name that the solo voice just sang, they do me honor. In this they do well. Notice how many times it says honor in this passage. Dante's trying to say something. Thus I saw gather the beautiful school of that Lord of the highest of all songs, that above the rest like an eagle soars. After they reasoned together somewhat, they turned toward me with a sign of welcome, at which my master smiled. And furthermore, those masters did me still greater honor, for truly they made me one of their troop, so that I made 6 among such good sense. This is great. So there's layers here, right? Dante the Pilgrim is honored to be counted among such great lights, such great poets. Homer, Virgil, Horace, Ovid, Lucan, Dante, right? And yet, what is happening at a deeper level? Should Dante be so honored? Should the Pilgrim be honored to be counted as one of this host, one of this group, one of this elite group? Where are they? Right? Where are they? Does gaining the acclaim of the greatest poets that ever lived equal losing your soul? Is it worth losing your soul? Right? Jesus says, what is it if a man gained the whole world but lost his soul? Here Dante esteems greatly the honor that he has been given by these poets, but we have to step back and think, at what cost, right? Is this where you want to be? Is this how you want to be honored? Is the honor of the damned, is the honor of those who have rejected and rebelled against God, is that something to boast in? The Pilgrim has things to learn. In this way we walked on until the light, speaking things about which silence is sweet as speaking them there where I was. So they're having a fun little gab about poetry, and he's not going to repeat it because it's a poets club type thing. We reached the foot of a noble castle, encircled 7 times by a high wall, defended by a lovely rivulet. This we passed over as on solid ground. Thence through the 7 gates with these sages, we arrived at a lawn of fresh verdure. A people were there with eyes slow and grave, with great authority in their faces. They rarely spoke, though their voices were sweet. We drew off all together to one side, an open place quite luminous and high, from which I was able to see them all. Across from us, above the glossy green, the great spirits were there revealed to me. I exult in myself having seen them. I saw Electra with a great party, among which I saw Hector, Aeneas, Caesar, armed with griffin-like eyes. griffin. The griffin was a symbol of Christ in the Middle Ages, and we'll meet a griffin at the top of purgatory. And so Caesar, with griffin-like eyes, identifies in Dante's mind and in his worldview a similarity between the head of the temporal realm and the head of the spiritual realm. The Pope and Caesar occupy similar positions, but over different lanes, right? The Pope over the spiritual world, Caesar over the eternal or the temporal world. And so throughout the comedy, we're going to see examples from the civil realm and examples from the ecclesiastical realm, from state and from church. We'll get to the relationship later in Purgatorio, but here just identifying that Caesar has griffin-like eyes. Caesar acts as a Christ figure in some limited ways. I saw Camilla, and at Penthesilea on the other side was King Latinus, sitting with Lavinia, his daughter. I saw Brutus, who banished the Tarquins, Lucretia, Julia, Cornelia, Marcia, and off by himself, Saladin. I raised my eyes a little more and saw sitting down the master of all that know, amidst a philosophic family. That, of course, is Aristotle. They all gaze at him and do him honor. There I saw both Socrates and Plato standing near to him in front of the rest. Democritus, who gives the world to chance, Diogenes and Anaxagoras, Thales, Empedocles, Heraclitus, Zeno. I saw the great herb collector, Orpheus, Tully, Linus, and moral Seneca, Euclid the geometer, Ptolemy, Hippocrates, Avicenna, Galen, and he who wrote the great commentary, Averroes. I cannot sketch it all in full, for my long theme so presses me on that often the telling falls short of the facts. That company of 6 dropped down to 2. My wise leader led me another way, out of the quiet into trembling air. I came to dark regions where nothing shines. All right, so he's walked through this great host of pagan nobility, both mythological and historical, he sees them all there as emblems of virtue, human virtue, external virtue in some way. They are still in hell, and so they did not have the root of the matter, but what they had was worth honoring in some limited way. And so this is where he sees them. All right, Canto 4 is done, and on to Canto 5, The Lustful. We'll see you then.